Welcome everyone to History Gone Wilder, part of Half History Will Travel. I'm your host, the Wilder historian, Dr. Lucas Wilder, and after setting up the Battle of the Wilderness with last week's episode, now I'm diving right in with the battle, starting with Saunders Field. If you'd like to help support the channel, please consider subscribing if you haven't done so already, purchase something from the Teespring store or Etsy shop, and join the Patreon page. Every little bit helps. Thank you. By 11:30 a.m. on May 5th, Getty's division made it to the crossroads of the Brock Road and the Orange Plank Road, blocking Heath's division from gaining the vital location. Ulysses S. Grant and George Meade were becoming increasingly frustrated, particularly with Governor K. Warren's lack of aggression. Warren was called to Meade's headquarters, where Meade criticized him for not moving his corps forward and attacking Lee when ordered to do so. After the meeting, Warren told General Griffin's aide in harsh words to move that division forward at once. It was now noon, and Griffin was finally able to move his division out from behind the breastworks that the men threw up to protect themselves from rebel bullets. At about 1 o'clock, the Union regiments made it to the jumping-off point. The brigades of Romaine Ayres and Joseph Bartlett sent their first line of men forward toward the enemy. Halfway across Saunders Field, the volleys from the Virginians and North Carolinians ripped into their lines. Seeing the problems the first line was having, the second line was thrown in to give them support, but their flanks were unsecure. Miraculously, many of the regiments on the front lines were making it across the field, amid the hail of gunfire. When Leroy Stafford's Louisianians and Walker's Virginians fired deadly volleys into the flank of the U.S. regulars, it crumbled, leaving the 140th New York out front, awaiting the second line. Naturally, it gravitated to the left to connect with Bartlett's men. When Ayres' second line got into the field, the same destructive fire that eliminated scores of U.S. regulars did the same thing to the two Pennsylvania regiments. When they left, this only left the 140th and 146th New York regiments north of the Orange Turnpike. The Virginians were holding steady, but to the south the Iron Brigade, led by Lysander Cutler from Wadsworth's division, was coming to Griffin's rescue. The 7th Indiana from the Iron Brigade hit John M. Jones's flank, and it began to crumble under the weight of the attack. Each regiment began to fall like dominoes. As some of the Virginians passed Cullen Battle's Alabama Brigade, some Alabamians asked, "Is the whole army retreating?" A Virginian said, "Yes, we are all falling back to Mine Run. The whole army is." This was enough to send the 5th and 3rd Alabama headed to the rear with the Virginians. Now the Union regiments had a foothold on the Confederate line, but could they hold it? The dense forest and thickets prevented them from seeing the enemy, but the light resistance indicated that the Confederates were fleeing in their front. However, the attack had thrown each regiment into confusion as men lost contact with their units. As they moved forward like a large mob, they came into contact with John B. Gordon's Georgians, who had recently arrived at the location. On the Orange Turnpike, Ewell was attempting to hold his line together. He grabbed a flag, planted it on the turnpike, and yelled to an orderly to tell General Gordon to bring up his brigade. The Federal soldiers retreated back across Saunders Field. A battery of artillery remained on the turnpike in the middle of the field. The 3rd and 1st North Carolina advanced to lay claim to the prize, but Federal bullets erupted from the tree line. The Tar Heels couldn't stay out in the open long before they retreated. Before they left, they placed small flags on the cannons to tempt the Union regiments. It worked. The 9th Massachusetts advanced into the field to claim the guns, but the rebel bullets ripped into their ranks, producing 150 casualties in just a few minutes. The Bay Staters returned to their lines. The first attacks made by Griffin's division of Warren's 5th Corps ended in utter defeat, even though they initially gained some success. To the south, Wadsworth's division was attacking two brigades of Robert Rodes's division. The thick forest prevented either side from seeing the other. Men aimed at the smoke discharged from the rifled muskets. The Iron Brigade was working around the flank of Dole's Georgians, but Dole's men were holding steady, the trees giving them some shield against the Federal bullets. As it looked as though the Georgians were beginning to break, Gordon, whom Ewell had requested to move forward, advanced and hit the Iron Brigade, driving them east. The Georgians gave the famous rebel yell as they advanced through the thick forests of the wilderness. Gordon then split his brigade to deal with multiple threats. Parke continued east, pushing the retreating Midwesterners. The others moved south to help Daniel's brigade push back what was left of Rice's brigade. Samuel Crawford, the division commander whom Warren couldn't get to close up on Wadsworth's left flank, finally moved some troops in that direction. 3 regiments from McCandless's brigade of Pennsylvania Reserves made it to the field late. They cautiously moved through the thick underbrush that characterized the wilderness until they got to Higginson's field. Part of Gordon's Georgia Brigade advanced across the field with the 61st Georgia hitting the flank of the partial Union Brigade. Hundreds of the 7th Pennsylvania Reserve were taken prisoners in this quick movement. The rest, along with the 11th and 2nd Pennsylvania Reserves, retreated in haste from the field. Warren's attack in the beginning stages of the Battle of the Wilderness had resulted in complete failure. General Griffin, outraged at the lack of support and the fact that he was ordered to make such a senseless attack, came to Meade's headquarters, finding Grant, Meade, and Grant's Adjutant General, John Rawlins, there. Griffin let loose a tirade asking where his support was and why he was asked to sacrifice his division in such a way. Grant and Rawlins were appalled at Griffin's comments. Rawlins suggested that Griffin be arrested. Grant agreed by saying, "Who is this General Gregg? You ought to arrest him." Meade had known Griffin for some time and replied to Grant, "It's not Gregg, but Griffin, and it's only his way of talking," and assured both Grant and Rawlins that Griffin was indeed a good soldier. When Grant leaned back and lit up a cigar, Griffin left the scene. So far, Lee's line had held on, but more attacks were about to be made. The battle had just begun, but so far, the Confederates had the advantage.